Segment 2, Golden Black Live. Brian Newbert joins me. What Tim Lester was impressive. Certainly fun to listen to, and a lot to hit on. Certainly.
Yeah, pretty interesting guy. Good personality, a lot of energy. Purdue needs energy in this new coaching staff. I think that's the way out of this. If there is a way out of this, is you got to have energy. You got to work hard. You got to have personalities. You got to be able to recruit. Got to be able to relate to kids, coach, et cetera, et cetera. So he certainly seems to fit the criteria.
No question. At least he passed the Golden Black Live test. We want to thank our sponsors, which is a lot for anybody. Thank our sponsors, XXX, on the hill but on the level of Purdue tradition since 1929. John Basham and the folks at Basham Rentals are going hot and heavy for rentals for the 2016-17 academic year. Hilton Garden Inn, when tomorrow's a big day, stay at HGI tonight. Christy Kuntz hosts a lot of great events down there. Was down there for an event this Tuesday morning. Heard Morgan Burke talk about Purdue facilities. And, of course, State Farm agent Trent Johnson. I've already had a couple texts from Trent asking some very important questions on Purdue sports, and I always enjoy that. TrentIsMyAgent.com. Brian, we had a lot of good feelings about Purdue men's basketball and the win on Tuesday night. If you're a Purdue fan, just getting out of that game alive. Now you Boilermakers head to Michigan, and it seems to me, from my perspective, an extremely important game just to kind of back up what you saw on Tuesday.
Yeah, obviously, Michigan's not played terribly well at home lately. Not played terribly well, period. They just beat Minnesota at Minnesota, but nearly squandered a pretty significant lead. You do want to see Purdue. Purdue's played well to start this February gauntlet. They competed well at Maryland.
Yeah.
Obviously, grinded one out against Michigan State, one that almost got away from you. Had that gotten away from you, that would have been, borderline disastrous in terms of what could have been. But obviously, Purdue stacks up pretty well with Michigan, having already beaten them by, I think, 17 the first time around. You got to get the road games to make a difference between, you have to hold serve at home, and then every road game matters. And getting Michigan, getting Nebraska, those are two big ones, because it's easy to lose on the road in the Big Ten, as everybody knows. And this is a prime opportunity to do that against an opponent with a lot of shooters who can get really hot really quick, create a lot of matchup problems for you. So obviously a very big game here for Purdue. You could see this one going either way. Purdue's playing pretty well right now, I think. So I like their chances, but it could go either way.
Yeah, and the Boilermakers have 6 conference games left? Is that right? And obviously the three road games at Michigan, at Nebraska, and of course Indiana a week from Saturday night. What did you take from Purdue down 4? Kind of a similar pattern in that game that we've seen in the Iowa games and in some others, in terms of the Iowa game especially, with getting that big lead and then watching it evaporate very, very quickly. Yeah. How important is the fact that Purdue was able to pull this one out in the way that they did?
I thought that this was Michigan State taking it more than it was Purdue blowing it.
Yeah.
When Purdue struggles, it turns the ball over, but when you deconstruct that game, Purdue turned the ball over too much in the first half too. The difference, obviously, is shooting. Had Purdue not turned the ball over in the first half while it was shooting the way it was, it might have been up by 25 points at halftime. I thought the second half was the game evening out. Michigan State's really good. They have a lot of guys who can get hot, make a lot of shots. Denzel Valentine obviously made a lot of really big plays. He kind of giveth, he kind of taketh away, too, from Michigan State a little bit with some of his decision-making down the stretch. Obviously, the last foul, however you want to perceive that. But I just thought the second half was that game evening out between two very good basketball teams. So the fact Purdue was down 4 with 2 minutes to go and came back and won that game, I think spoke volumes about Purdue, because I thought that game was over.
Yeah,
I thought when Purdue let the big lead slip, got down multiple possessions to Michigan State there, was struggling to execute in the half court at the time, was struggling to get stops, but you have to give Purdue credit for doing everything the last couple minutes of that game in regulation and then in overtime to get what's probably its biggest win of the season thus far.
Yeah, being a top 10 ranked team, I think the first time in 18 games, I believe it was, back to 2011, and that the Boilermakers had last time they'd beaten a top 10 ranked team. And Michigan State, Denzel Valentine's barrage at got that game from 12 to 13 points to 5 about as fast as you could get it. I mean, that's a very talented guy.
Yeah, that 6-point possession obviously changed the entire complexion of the game. It was interesting the way the game was officiated. I think there was a lot of stuff that was let go. I know the Michigan State people were upset about the last call on A.J. Hammonds. That could have been a moving screen. I think he got away with a moving screen. But then at the same time, that's kind of basketball. You kind of win some, you lose some. I can give you about 12 points Michigan State scored that came after egregious, missed calls one way or another. And that's just kind of the way basketball works. I think Purdue caught a break there getting that foul, but they also lost some, too, throughout the course of the game.
And there are some also talk about A.J. Hammond's traveling and that, and I don't know. I've watched it back a couple times.
I think the traveling was after he pulled the ball away from Matt Costello on the
at the end of
offensive
the game,
rebound, which would have given Michigan State the ball back, but with like a second and a half to go.
If that. So okay.
That is far less relevant than the foul that put Rafael Davis at the line to win the game.
Yeah, and obviously, they would have had less than it would have been a fraction of a second, certainly at that point in time. P.J. Thompson's injury, we don't know for sure what that status is. He set out yesterday. But the play of Thompson's numbers are absolutely amazing in terms of his efficiency and his assist turnover ratio. How do you look at that situation if you can't go tomorrow? Johnny Hill did some big things, obviously, in the Michigan State game. They've really been a good tandem for the most part this year.
Yeah, I think if they don't have P.J. Thompson tomorrow, and I don't think there's a whole lot of reason to think they won't. Matt Painter even went out of his way today to say that he might still play even if he doesn't practice. And I think you're dealing with an astute enough player here where it doesn't matter all that much for him to miss a couple of practices. Obviously, Purdue's already played Michigan this year, so he's digested at least one scouting report about the Wolverines. You don't want him limited because Derek Walton's a very difficult defensive matchup. If Purdue doesn't have P.J. Thompson, Johnny Hill obviously logs bigger minutes, and he's been really solid at times, but has had some lapses. And if those lapses come at the wrong time, it can really hurt you. Dakota Mathias then becomes their number 2 point guard, theoretically. Difficult defensive matchup for him on Derek Walton. You would like to get him, I think, some more minutes here and there, so there might be some offensive benefit to that. But I don't know if defensively that's an ideal matchup for Purdue. You really want to have Thompson out there, especially in this environment, because he's been absolutely rock solid this entire season, but especially lately. When you look at this stretch of games in February, people were looking at PJ. I know some people on the internet were talking about, well, his turnover numbers are unbelievable, but wait till they play Maryland, Michigan State. Well, he's got 0 turnovers in those 2 games, Maryland, Michigan State. I think he's got like 5 assists over those 2 games, which is a modest number, but he was absolutely, I thought, a commanding presence on offense against Michigan State. I thought he really had control of the game in the half court. I thought he really did a lot of positive things. He just hasn't made a lot of shots lately, but he hasn't taken a lot of shots either. He did make a couple of big 2-point baskets against Michigan State, but he hasn't shot the 3 very much and hasn't made any. And that's the one thing that maybe hasn't happened in these last two games. But everything else, defensively, in his command offensively, his ball security, his reliability have stayed, in context, off the charts. When you look at what people expected from P.J. Thompson relative to what he has provided Purdue this season, he's been one of the great success stories of this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's been very, very impressive in terms of just his efficiency, and really now also you see those signs of leadership, et cetera, that he has done a great job with, and that is an important part of a team that can be successful down the road. One question we have been talking about is Purdue's ceiling on this season, and we know that through 11 games there were a lot of talk about that this team could be destined for Houston. Maybe not now, but certainly not never eliminated from that until you're eliminated, and they have a long way to go. But what is this team? Is it as simple as having a go-to guy at crunch time? I mean, outside of A.J. Hammonds, that somebody else who goes.
That's a pretty good one.
Yeah, but my point being is that it's hard to have a center sometime in that situation. I'm talking about a guy on the floor that can really score. Is it Vince Edwards? Is that the key, or how do you view this in terms of this team fully reaching its ceiling?
Well, looking at Purdue's ceiling, and by ceiling, I guess we'll talk about what they're capable of in the NCAA tournament. The thing that would concern me is they are so matchup vulnerable still defensively. Now, opponents are all going to be matchup vulnerable against Purdue on the glass and on the interior. But if Purdue struggles to get stops when games matter the most, that is something that can undo your season real quick. And I still think Purdue is not the best perimeter defensive team in college basketball. I still think there are a lot of matchup problems, with the 4 position, with the size Purdue puts on the floor, with big men who can shoot, that if you run in the wrong matchup at the NCAA tournament, it's over then and there sometimes. So that's the sort of thing. Purdue's also got to get favorable officiating. And
Yeah.
NCAA tournament's always a crapshoot. When Purdue's able to get a bunch of early fouls in the post and get into the bonus quicker and quicker, and that gives them 5 or 6 more points at the end of the day than they would have had otherwise, I think that's another huge advantage for Purdue. But I just think they're so matchup vulnerable defensively that's just something where matchups matter even more come NCAA tournament draw time.
You got 6 games left in the schedule. What's realistic to what Purdue can do down the stretch? I mean, obviously you talk about Maryland, Wisconsin at home. You have Northwestern at home, and then within the 3 road games. What do you foresee?
Purdue can win all of them, or they can go 500 the rest of the way. I mean, I think it's just one of those deals where when an opponent is shooting really well, and when there are those matchups that are a problem, Purdue can lose to teams maybe that on paper you think that that's not going to happen. Starting Saturday, Michigan, if they get hot from the perimeter and they're able to exploit that matchup at the 4 defensively, and Purdue really has a hard time getting stops, that game can go sideways on Purdue. If Nebraska has Siobhan Shields back come that trip to Lincoln, the same thing can happen. Purdue had some difficulty with Nebraska the first time, ended up winning pretty favorably, but there are
Tight game, though, for a while.
There are
Absolutely.
some defensive issues with the way they play. If they don't have Siobhan Shields, forget it. Purdue's going to win that game. But if they do have Siobhan Shields and he's back and he's playing the way he was playing earlier this season, then that's going to be a difficult game. Maryland, I like their chances in the rematch. Melo Trimble's not going to shoot the way he shot in College Park, but Purdue's not going to shoot the way it shot in College Park either. They're not going to make 3 of 25 3-pointers with Nike basketballs in Mackey Arena. So I like their chances there. Bloomington is an entirely different animal. I mean, I'm shocked every time Purdue wins in Assembly Hall.
That will be tough in Indiana, certainly.
But I could see this going either way. I could see Purdue winning out. I could see Purdue going 500 the rest of the way. It's all just, I mean, every game is different. And with Purdue, every matchup is different. And we'll see, I guess. That's not an answer at all.
Yeah, well, no, but one look at
talking.
Indiana is a clear example. Obviously, and we know in the Big Ten that you go to Penn State, you lose, you come back and really, I know the game was relatively close with Iowa, but Indiana had the upper hand for a lot of that game as well.
Iowa had that game won, I thought, halfway through the second half. I thought
the way they come back.
I thought they'd broken Indiana, and Indiana did a great job getting its legs back under it, making a bunch of plays at the end, getting some stops, and I thought Indiana showed a lot of mettle.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see that matchup as well, and I think there'll be a few people tuned into that one, 8 o'clock a week from Saturday in Bloomington. That'd be February the 20th. All right, Brian, we're going to take a short break, come back and catch our breath and talk athletic directorships and Morgan Burke and his legacy, but also the search and all that went into the decision for Morgan to retire and what may be ahead. So we'll take a short break, be back in a couple of minutes on Gold and Black Live.